It's simple propaganda meant to play on our fear and our emotions, and they have been doing it our entire lives. One problem, and I quote, problem, one bill, one law, and one right at a time, taken away from us. And here we are on the border of becoming a police state. One in which crime has not been controlled as it was never meant to be. One in which the real terrorists act with impunity, as they always have, and one in which immigration is still an unnecessary problem. It is actually a solution to the powers that be. So their little games and false promises in reality were nothing but moves being made against us under the premise that it was all meant to protect us. What a joke. And this new law is nothing different. I bet you thought I was for this new law, right? Well, we might agree that there is a problem. We'd have to be blind not to see it. But I reject their solution. Here, you want a common sense solution, one that would have solved this problem before it ever became one, and one that is still an easy and permanent solution. All that must be done is that any, and I mean any employer that is caught paying an illegal should be heavily fined, and I do mean heavy, upon the first offense, then put out of business and the owner incarcerated for breaking this common sense and completely just law the second time. And of course, they need to be completely cut off from receiving any, and I mean any, social services. How do illegals get social services in the first place? Wouldn't you think that the food stamps and people like this are going to check for legal citizenship? These people should be arrested upon asking for these things, for these handouts. They have no right to these things. So it's an easy solution to cut them off from the billions of dollars that they're bleeding us from in social services. When they take their children to a school to register them, if they don't have legal documentation, they shouldn't be allowed. Absolutely not. I mean, this is common sense, is it not? And if they don't have a way to secure an income, then probably 95+% of them wouldn't be here. Some of them could probably live off their legal family members and stuff like that, but most wouldn't be here if they couldn't provide for themselves, if they couldn't get these illegal wages. So this would be very easy to shut these things off, but the very fact that they're being given social services and it's made easy for them lets you know that the government doesn't want to stop these things. When federal funds are being allocated to provide these people with a way of life, taxing us, the taxpayers, the legal citizens, of course this is intentional. How can you not see that? This isn't a problem to them. Again, this is a solution. They want them to come over here. They want to give them a free ride. This is not by accident. And anyone who thinks it's an accident is a damn fool. You're blind. You're not wanting to see the truth. Again, what right do they have to our money anyway? That makes us their slaves, working to provide them with a free ride. Anyhow, that's it. Problem solved or reduced to the point that it would no longer be an issue. That would be just and fair to all parties. A man walking down the street should not be stopped without probable cause. Obviously, let's not forget or compromise on this. I never would suggest that we compromise on this, that we allow our basic rights to be compromised. I'm not going to suggest that anyone in this country should be harassed, and it is harassment, and stopped for no reason. We clearly have to be breaking some type of a law for them to have the right to infringe on our rights. They have no right. But we're willingly giving them that. Why? Because of this problem, this terrorist, this immigrant, this criminal, this, that, or the other. But this is just a way that they take us one step closer to a communist state where we have absolutely no rights whatsoever. That is what they want. They don't care about your best interest, your safety, or anything else. That's clear and obvious at this point in time. So do not compromise. Not at all, not on anything, not even a fraction of the way, because you think this reason, that reason, or the other justifies it. It doesn't. Absolutely not. There's a better way to deal with this problem. Anyhow, none of us should be stopped in the streets for no reason, but a person seeking employment can reasonably expect to have documentation required from him. This is not a violation of their rights. And on the flip side, we don't have to sacrifice our rights, and employers should be held accountable. So that's a solution right there. And again, if these employers were to break such a law in order to increase their profit margins, then we should charge them with treason, because that's what it amounts to here. Anyhow, we will never get any common sense solutions out of these bastards for obvious reasons. Our problems are their solutions. Anyhow, I'd now like to speak a little further on some of these racial issues involved in this whole situation, the ones that are lying just beneath the surface, the ones we are never supposed to talk about. As I mentioned before, a lot of people focus on the legality of these immigrants being here. Not wanting to appear racist, they hide behind a law and a government that they believe are there to protect them. But again, I don't personally care about any laws that are written by people who obviously do not have our best interests in mind. Now, obviously, a prerequisite to thinking along these lines is the fact that you have to be aware of who is really in charge. Then you will know that they don't have our best interests in mind, so therefore you will not care about the law, and you will not have any false hope that the government is there to protect you. They could suddenly make it legal for everyone in Asia, Africa, and South America to flood our borders, and basically that's what they've done. They've brought them here by the tens of millions. But they wouldn't have been able to pull off any of this in the first place had they failed to convince whites that race does not exist, and to condemn anyone who realizes that it does exist and dares to try and awaken others to the dangers of allowing ourselves to become a minority in our own countries. So they've convinced many people that it doesn't exist, the masses, and for those of us who realize that it does and that something is going to be a loss, and we try to educate people on these things, they've condemned us with their relentless propaganda campaign that has basically condemned us automatically as being racist, hateful, evil, Nazis, supremacists, all this nonsense, right? But let's get past that. I'm not speaking to the mindless masses out there. I believe most of you at this point in time realize that race is an obvious reality. Do any of you really believe that we are all the same? That nothing will change when your people are displaced with people who have a foreign culture and a foreign way of life? Do you believe that your culture isn't a unique representation of who you are? Do you believe that your very existence means nothing? Well, do you want to live in Haiti, Liberia, Mexico? No, probably not, or you would have made your move already. Then why do you want these places brought to you? And that is exactly what you are allowing to happen, since these people bring their ways and their culture with them. Now, people like us who are in the know, who are racially aware and Jew-wise, we can see where all of this is heading. So we have a sense of urgency to stop the bleeding. But little Johnny and little Susie living in small town USA have been so thoroughly brainwashed that they are not only incapable of seeing what is clearly coming down the road, but they think that we are paranoid, that we are racist, hateful, and everything else that they have been programmed to believe. So eventually we give in and tell them, yeah, sure, okay, we're racist, we're ugly, we're toothless, we live in a trailer, whatever you want to say about us. But please, and we plead with them, to just look at the facts. These facts will not change regardless of who you think we are or what you believe our motives to be. So to little Johnny and little Susie, all I have to do is to point to the demographic shifts that are taking place all around us, both on a small scale in a neighborhood near you and on a larger, in fact, global scale as well. It is a relatively slow shift, but the next generation is being shorted and will suffer a great deal due to our allowing it to slip even further. It's madness and insanity how we have been programmed to accept our own genocide, but people just don't see it. Well, thank goodness for the net, is all I have to say. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to step back and see things for what they are or understand the reasons behind them either. I knew something was wrong my entire life as the demographics in my neighborhood and the city that I grew up in began to shift. But I didn't quite get it, and I certainly didn't stop to think about Jews, since, of course, there were no Jews present in my lower class neighborhood. I just knew that things were changing for the worse. Things were not getting better, definitely. But I didn't understand why. To some degree, I could obviously see the transition taking place right before my very eyes. Of course, I was taught, just like everyone else, that we're all the same, that we're just different skin colors and stuff like that. And as a child, I might not have been able to understand that we are clearly not all the same. But I did see that things were taking a turn for the worse, without a doubt. But by no means did I have the ability to understand, nor would I understand for a very long time to come, the Jewish involvement and the Jewish intent behind it all. Anyhow, the white race has persevered, survived, and even prospered in the face of adversity throughout the ages, overcoming all obstacles before us and dealing with most external threats with ease. But this we cannot survive. Most of us are not even aware of the threat. And at this point, many of us who are aware find ourselves in a compromised position, one that is either difficult or even impossible to deal with. So many choose to ignore the bigger picture and fall right in line with this whole race does not exist craziness. Otherwise, they will be forced to question their own life decisions and forced to realize that they play a complicit role in this Jewish agenda. Now, this is something I have had to deal with myself, being that my wife is not 100% white, being that most of my friends are not white. But I simply will not allow these personal quagmires to cloud my vision or confuse my message. Like I said, we cannot be held completely accountable for things that we did not know prior to becoming aware. And if all things were equal back when I met my wife in the early 90s, I would admit right now that I would have preferred a woman who was 100% white for what are now obvious reasons. I'm not going to abandon my children with her because they are only 90% white or whatnot, but I will certainly not be abandoning the truth either, just to suit my own personal interests or the situation I have found myself in. To do so would give others the message that it is okay to seek a mate outside of your race, or even desirable to do so, which of course is what the Jews have wanted us to do all along. So I will highlight the clear reasons why we should not look to do so. I won't condemn those who have chose to date outside of their race, especially if they were unaware and could not see the big picture at the time of doing so. That'd make me hypocritical, wouldn't it? But I damn sure won't promote it either. Most people will simply not go all the way with the truth. They will hold back. They will see everything else that the Jews have done, but when it comes to the racial dynamics of it all, the racial aspect of it all, they live in denial. They think that multiculturalism is good, we're all the same, the only enemy is the Jew, and that race mixing is fine because there's no difference in race and all these other things. But this is clearly not the case. Most people will just stop because of their own selfish interests. Maybe it'll make them look like a hypocrite. Maybe it makes me look like a hypocrite to some extent. Whatever the reasons, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to tell it like it is. Now, I've pointed this out before. I'm going to bring it up once more. I point to George Lincoln Rockwell, once upon a time. This gentleman, who, by the way, to those of you that don't know, he founded the American Nazi Party. But once upon a time, he actually volunteered to fight against the Nazis in World War II. Why? Because he believed they were evil, racist, this, that, and all these other things that he had been taught by the Jew propaganda machine here in the United States in the 30s. So he joined and he fought against the Germans, the Nazis, in World War II. Later on, once he became aware, once he knew what was going on, and at that point in time, he can be held accountable. He should be held accountable, in my opinion. But at that point in time, this man went so far as to start the American Nazi Party. He went from fighting Nazis when he completely bought into all the Jew lies to actually forming the American Nazi Party. Eventually, he gave his life. He was executed for doing so. And he went about giving this message without apology, without holding back. He was very direct, fearless, a fearless leader, one that we have not seen the likes of since. I don't think we have, at least. But the point being is, he went all the way, giving his life for what he believed in, taking a complete 180-degree turn from what he thought was the truth previously. So are you going to hold him accountable when he didn't know any better? Or people like my uncles who died in World War II, or your family members and stuff like that who were obviously fighting on the wrong side? We were obviously fighting, or they were fighting on the wrong side at this point in time. You should be aware of that. So do we hold them accountable? No, they were honorable men. They were doing what they thought was the right thing to do. So many people at this point in time who have found themselves in a compromised position on a personal level, perhaps by choosing a mate or friendships or whatever. We've all established friendships with non-whites, and it just doesn't make it a comfortable situation for us to speak along racial lines, especially when we've been taught that that's racist and hateful to do so. Again, I got a lot of black friends, a lot of non-white friends, and I'll tell them like it is. I'm not suggesting harm, violence towards anyone, or wishing bad luck on them or nothing else. No, I'm just speaking along racial lines in the interests of people who were targeted, who are being targeted. Now, they feel they're being targeted in their own way, and they speak up in their interest. Well, whites are definitely being targeted in our own way. We don't have to say we're being targeted more or less or whatever else. We're just being targeted, okay? And we don't have to get into a, we're better than you are, or supreme in any way, shape, or form. No, we're different. That's all it has to be discussed. We are different, and we need to preserve our culture, our way of life, our race.